Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 9th Coffee with EMBL. This is really quite remarkable that this is already the 9th event that we're holding. So if this is your first time here, welcome. And if you're one of our regular participants, welcome back. It's quite remarkable, I feel, that this whole Coffee with EMBL series, which started as an idea for us to, as a community, come together and cope with this extraordinary year that we're having, has moved on from that initial let's everyone get together and share their experience of the lockdown and metamorphosed into, I think, a fantastic way of linking online EMBL alumni around the world with EMBL staff. And so for this event, we have over 200 people registered. More than 100 have already logged on, roughly 3 to 1 alumni to staff. And with participation, once again, from countries all over Europe, as well as from both North and South America and Asia. It's been really quite remarkable how this has linked people together across time zones and disciplines and areas. I have to say, it's felt like a long year. As some of you may know, at the end of 2019, I celebrated my 60th birthday. And inevitably, after turning 60, I was wondering, would the next year ahead in 2020 feel much different? I didn't quite expect it to be as different as it's turned out to be. And I hope that wasn't all entirely my fault then that this has happened. But this has been quite a remarkable year in many ways. And I think one that we're all going to feel we'll never forget and be quite glad that we're moving on, hopefully with some extra confidence that 2021 will see changes back to a more normal way of life where we can travel again, worsen our carbon footprints, but hopefully enjoy meeting up with our friends as we travel around the world again. At the same time, our cups or glasses are more than half full. And I think in adversity and in lockdown, we've learned all how to interact with each other online. We've become experts in using Zoom and other online communication platforms. And while we don't want to use that forever, it is, I think, a fantastic opportunity that it has uncovered for us to communicate in ways that we couldn't do before. And I hope we'll build on that going forward. So as I said, this is the 9th of these Coffee with EMBL events. And we are planning to hold more of them in 2021. And we'll come back to that later. We do want to encourage everyone to give us their feedback and to suggest ideas for topics that we can explore. Inevitably, during 2020, the coronavirus, the lockdown, and how society and science has reacted to it in multiple different ways has tended to dominate the topics of these meetings. We very much hope in future it won't have to dominate in quite the same way in future. But there's a lot of other topics that we can and should explore. And we've already started that with our discussions around the environment and ways in which science communicates with the public. And we've got a very interesting topic suggested by one of our guests, Iain, today, which I think opens up a lot of relevant and important concepts that we can all share in the discussion today. So today we have 3 guests. And I'd like to introduce all of them to you before we start our discussion. Our first guest needs no introduction by me, so I'm going to let him introduce himself. And this is the former Director General of EMBL, Iain Mattaj. Iain, hello.
Thanks, Angus. I always forget how young you are.
Yeah, anyway. Right.
Yeah,
so let me just... 60th years, that's right. So the next guest I'd like to introduce is not only an alumnus of EMBL, but indeed an alum of the Mattaj lab, which is Katharina Ribbeck, who was a postdoc in Iain's lab and is now working in Boston. Katharina has gone on to fame and fortune. So working with Iain did not entirely destroy her career. As I'm sure you all know, Katharina, amongst many other achievements, was the winner of the previous John Kendrew Award. And her fame has risen so that she recently, I'm told, featured in Der Spiegel. with an article about Wir brauchen Schleim zum Überleben, I think, which roughly would mean we need mucus to survive. And I'm sure Katharina will be clearing her throat and telling us about her interests in the near future. And final, last but not least, we have Eileen Furlong, who is what I like to think of as a pre-alum, someone preparing for a future pleasure as a member of the Alumni Association. And in the meantime, while she's waiting for this honor, she's head of the Genome Biology Unit in Heidelberg. Hello, Eileen.
Angus, do you know something from Edith that I don't know? Should I start looking for jobs?
I'm just confident at some point in your future career, Eileen, you will be able to join all of us, and many of the people here will be able to convince you there is life after EMBL, but I'm sure that will be a long time in the future. So those are our three guests for today. And as you saw in the intro graphics, we have a topic for discussion today, which is the theme of whether we should feature competition or collaboration in science. Now, that's something that can operate on a whole range of different levels. I was fascinated that when we asked Iain to suggest a topic he might like to discuss with us today, that was what he came up with. And by complete coincidence, in a few days ago, one of my own memories of my 8 years that I spent previously in Heidelberg and then starting our family in Heidelberg was learning about some of the traditions that we don't have in the UK, but many of you in Europe know about, like Nicholas Abend. And we still celebrate that. 25 years after leaving Heidelberg, we still put our shoes at the back door and hope we'll get a present. And this year, I was fortunate enough for a change not to get a lump of coal, but rather a gift. And I was given a gift by Nicholas of a board game, which was a game to combat pandemics. Who would have imagined that would have happened? But this was also the first board game I've ever tried to play, where remarkably, for me, the idea wasn't to beat your competing players, but everyone playing the game had to act as a team to beat the game. And so the whole point of it was for people to manage to collaborate with each other and cooperate with each other. Otherwise, we either all won together or we all lost together. And it did make me realize that really from thinking back to my own children from kindergarten in Wiesenbach in Germany, from their time in kindergarten right the way through, almost subliminally, we teach in our societies children that competition is, from the start. You play games, whether it's, snakes and ladders or some other type of Monopoly or some other type of board game. Normally, right from the beginning, we bring competition in. And I'd never really thought about that. It was that juxtaposition of getting this first ever game that was a collaborative game and Iain suggesting this topic that made me realize just how often we take for granted the idea that you have to compete. And I guess in biology, we're used to competition being the leitmotif of evolution and the driver of improved complexity and success. But Iain, can you perhaps tell us a little bit about why you thought of that theme for today and what your views are about the pros and cons of competition versus collaboration?
I guess what I'd like to do rather than say that in the first opening part is just to provide a background for why I think it's fundamental in science, the equilibrium between competition and collaboration in order to move forward. And why is it important to think about this? And I think that the principle is pretty simple, that virtually all academic research was funded by the public, either directly through taxation or through foundations of charities that we donate to. And so essentially, the duty of the scientific community is to benefit us as much as they can. And so the question then, how does that relate to competition versus collaboration? And it's about what's the most efficient system to make the most benefit available to society. And when you think about that, you then have to define, what are the benefits of scientific research? And I think they fall into two major categories, one of which is a very general benefit, but which is the same benefit for any kind of research, whether it's social science or life sciences or physics or chemistry or mathematics or engineering or whatever it is. And that is to increase knowledge for society, to just make the knowledge base bigger. And that's fundamental. That's really what research is for in the end, is to make knowledge base bigger. It's very important to do this. And if I can, again, everybody spent the whole year talking about coronavirus. So let me get coronavirus. So we have a vaccine which is being pumped into people in the UK already. And that vaccine, the development could be so quick because of 60 years of molecular biology. And there are two aspects of the vaccine. There's the aspect of we know that messenger RNA is what you need in order to make a protein. And we know that making a protein inside a cell and present it to the immune system is how to get a vaccine to work. It's how to raise antibodies or activate T cells or whatever the immune system needs to do in order to fight a foreign body. And you do that by inducing the production or by introducing directly something to your immune system that your immune system can react. And it's for viruses in particular, for RNA viruses in particular, it's sort of a guessing. It's a very difficult guessing which protein to use. And so if you use a messenger RNA, you actually you solve that problem two ways. First, you can actually make multiple antibodies against the same substrate, which is a messenger RNA. And secondly, if the virus changes the next day, you can inject the mRNA of the changed version of the virus because it's very fast. You don't have to make a completely new protein vaccine in order to have an approach. So this is all great, but you need to get the messenger RNA not only into the body, but you need to get inside the cell where it can be made into protein. And that's the difficulty. And although many places have studied how cells ingest material and incorporate inside themselves through a process which is called endocytosis. And that's a process which has been under study at EMBL for at least 40 years, and lots of people have worked on it. But unlike gene expression, which is why we know about the fact that it's a good idea to use a messenger virus rather than a protein virus, unlike that, we still know so little about how cells take things up that we cannot subvert the system in order to make anything, actually, but in order to make a vaccine that would efficiently be taken up of the cell. So the vaccine which is being produced by Pfizer and Biochemistry, and also the similar ones that are being produced by Heidelberg, is useless at getting into cells. Absolutely useless. And in fact, the process of getting into cells can cause problems, because that's, you probably read today about a few patients suffered from allergic reaction. That's because it's being, the vaccine is being introduced into people in a mix of different sat molecules. And what we need is another 60 years of research in endocytosis until we can make delivery vehicles that will be able to actually efficiently introduce the cells. And then we'll be good at making vaccines and making them effective. So that's a benefit, no question. So it's a benefit which came from an increase in knowledge, which then enabled pharma companies, biotech companies, to develop processes and procedures, including chemically modifying messenger RNA so that it's not unstable, it's not as unstable. Something that Angus knows a lot about from his history, as it would be with just injecting normal messenger RNA. And it's a tremendous benefit, potentially, for the community. And if these mRNA vaccines are effective, it will be a first-line defense, and there will be other types of small molecule and other types of immunization that will come join it then, and we will perhaps come to an end of this sort of nightmare year, turning down shut-ups, 2 years of nightmare until we come to the end of the process and in the books and soil and get into it. So
on that, sorry, if I could just, I mean, I think I suspect everyone listening is 100% agreeing with you and looking forward to the, science delivering fantastic win and a vaccine. But I'm just interested on the topic of efficacy and efficiency, and how do you get the best result? So as you mentioned, the first vaccine that has gone to patients, at least here in the UK, is the Pfizer-BioNTech one. But I mean, we have heard from alumni associated with many different companies. There's more than 30 companies who in parallel were trying to develop vaccines. And it's an interesting question then is, would society around the world do better in getting higher quality vaccines delivered for more people faster if those companies collaborated with each other and shared their information? Or to what extent is it better that you let 30 different commercial companies race each other in the situation where the one that wins then makes all the money because they dominate it? I'm not expressing a view. I'm just interested in extending the discussion into asking, would it have been better for society, who in one way or another fund the basic research that all of these pharma companies depend upon, if they had been obliged, and it's the public who are going to pay for the vaccines they develop, I presume. So would we have been better served if we had obliged them to share information? Or is it okay to have winner takes all?
So I think this is an open question, and I was going to go there in a different way and not so directly. Okay. But I think it's. I mean, essentially, you're talking about one step in the process, and what I was trying to make clear, at least in my mind, is that this process has been going on for 15 years, 16 years. That leads us to here. And during that 50 or 60 years, there have been a huge number of decisions about whether to collaborate or to compete, and whether collaboration or competition works better. And I think there is, frankly, I don't think there is a clear answer to that. And so I think both things can work. And let me contrast or give what I usually regard to be the two extremes. So the US system is based very much in competition with the individuals. Whereas in Europe, and particularly with all of its defects, since the European Commission started to fund research, collaboration has become much more supported and much better supported. And it's, which is the words like that. It's not so clear. And does in any individual, and let me give an example for example. So the EMBL data, the actual data. So for example, the DNA sequence database, the gene type in America and the EMBL type in Europe and others in Japan and other parts of the world. They share their data, collaborate at the level. We share all the data, all available to everybody. But when it comes to making a tool in order to analyze that, like the genome browser, the Ensemble genome browser in San Diego, well, not San Diego, Muslim, and the Californian genome browser is the clock. That they develop in competition with input from different communities and became very good at different things without ever being a clear winner. And people needed to use the genome results got to know which was best of the question being asked. And so it's not that collaboration is always best or competition is always best. And for if I can get my answer and others should shut me up very soon and get back. But if I can give my answer to your question, I think if you hadn't had multiple countries competing in the vaccine, it would not have had anything like the speed we did it. The European Commission tried to put a lot of money into getting a collaborated effort to make the vaccine, and it got nowhere. It was companies competing that got something. That doesn't stop them from joining initiatives like the one started by Kiko or others. I think that's where it started. In order to make these vaccines available at a reasonable price and in a universal way. But we also need to recruit the money that we've spent to develop the vaccine. So there isn't a straightforward simple answer. And it's a question of balance between competition and collaboration at every level. So I didn't shut up and go over.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Iain, that you raised about the balance, and I think most people looking at this seeing unfettered competition, where the outcome, the end would always justify the means, is probably unpalatable at multiple levels, as we can unpack and discuss. But competition clearly is a great driver of innovation. And to prevent competition ever happening for political or ideological reasons would squander an opportunity for diversity of approach and exploring different possibilities, which indeed I think is the hallmark in biology of evolution. I'm going to be a bit naughty here and ask you, now there's a little bit of distance since when you were Director General. Was this topic ever one that you felt under pressure to reconcile from Council when you were Director General, to balance the wishes and desires of the member countries and the funders of EMBL with appointments or policy decisions you were taking?
I think not. There wasn't a single occasion when it was super obvious, but there were discussions about all sorts of topics that raised this issue in different ways. And maybe one of the one of the topics that came up quite soon before I came and before I left EMBL to recover, was the idea of open access publishing. Well, should EMBL have a policy to enforce open access publication? And then you can make the same argument. The public pays for the science. Why should we also pay for the journals, pay for access to them? Why shouldn't access to public be free? And it's a very straightforward, it's a very simple argument. And in some areas of research, it's almost not an argument. So in particle physics, it's almost not an argument because there are only 9,000 people. And so they all know each other and won't know each other's results. They don't meet each other. And so they can, open archives work and people comment on the archives. The life science community is huge. The life science community in Heidelberg is 90,000 people that are my baby. And so it's very difficult to imagine the same system working in the same way. And it was definitely the case in EMBL at the time that group leaders were very divided between those who were very much support open access and were prepared to live with any consequences for them and the members of their family, almost moving immediately to open access publication. And people who thought we won't be competitive, we won't be competitive for jobs, our postdocs won't be competitive for jobs if we don't publish in the closed access literature, which is partly the high prestige literature. And so that's an example of an issue that came up. And it came up in counseling because I wanted to introduce open access publication. And it would have cost EMBL across EMBL at the time about 450 to 600,000 euros a year to do that. Because in order to have open access publication, at that time there were not huge open access journals, you just had to pay a closed access journal to make your article open and to make it available. And the result of bringing this up is that cancer turned it back for purely financial reasons. They didn't even go into the ethics or whatever of the idea. They just said too much money. You can't do it. That's an example.
So one corollary of what you're saying, or one implication, so you made a statement, Iain, which I'm not disagreeing with, but in the spirit of Coffee with EMBL, I think we don't leave unexplored or unchallenged, which I think you said, or at least I understood you to have said that inevitably competition drives better results, because if we just take the example of the competing pharma companies, competing to make a better vaccine, we end up benefiting because we get a better vaccine. And then you also illustrated an example with the physics community, say particle physics community, where it's simply not achievable because of the cost and scale and complexity of building particle accelerators, that you really can have, 100 different groups doing the same thing and sort of head-to-head competing in quite the same way. So there does seem to be quite a difference between imposed by necessity between the particle physics community and the life sciences community. So my next question to you would be, do you think, therefore, that for historical reasons, because it was possible in the past to do biology often on a smaller personalized scale, that we've retained too long this cult of the personality, and it's more about which group wins prizes and gets Nobel prizes or other awards or big grants, rather than using the public's money in the most effective way to generate the largest amount of knowledge for humanity, which is, how you introduced it by saying that. So is it possible in life sciences to get useful, really good results through a more collaborative approach? Or do you think actually it's just much more practical to do it by having lots of smaller groups competing?
I think for sure it is. And as I said, I think one of the huge benefits to direct from the European Commission funding has been the increase in collaborative research and large-scale collaboration between people working in the same area. And in my view, that's been very positive. It has enabled them to be, strangely, it has enabled them to become more competitive because they now can do things together, working together, and they know each other. We get things done more quickly, we get things done more efficiently. And that the result is curious that we get more competitive as defined by that kind of content.
Could I jump?
Sorry.
My name is Peter Rottier. I just
Hi, Peter.
Just two remarks. I think that competition is of course good, and we because it speeds up research. If we look at the vaccine developments that have been going on, I think there is both competition, but also a lot of collaboration. If you look at the Moderna or BioNTech vaccines, but it holds also for the other ones, the Oxford, for instance. These are large consortia of research groups working together, often already several years on certain concepts, and so it's not these. So there is a lot of collaboration already. While there is, of course, competition between these different consortia, so to say. That's one remark. Another remark is that when you don't have this variety of approaches, you miss out on something. For instance, in this vaccine business, you don't know when a new virus comes up or another new pathogen. You don't know in advance what immune arms, what immune parts of the immune system are required to give good protection. We are lucky with the SARS-2 coronavirus that antibodies seem and appear to do the job, and they provide protection. But you don't, if you are unlucky, you certain vaccines, for instance, inactivated viruses or subunit vaccines, which do only induce antibodies, will not protect against a pathogen that requires T-cell immunity. So the other arm of the immune system. So if you would limit the competition, you might not be able to compare the different requirements that are needed for protection. So, so those are just a few considerations. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that. Thanks, Peter. And great to see you again and hear from you. I think one way we could think about competition versus collaboration, and I'm interested to hear people's opinions about this. I sometimes think it highlights a difference between a bottom-up approach, where competition allows, at a bottom-up level, many different groups or people to bring new ideas to the table. And one of the things that worries me about the collaborative approach I'm putting out there is that, done badly, we end up with squashing innovation because we have a top-down approach where you tend to have a smaller number of experts. You have Iain just making all the decisions and deciding what's important and what's the best ideas and pre-filtering this, and then you have this large edifice created to explore a filtered version of what we should be doing. Now, Iain, you mentioned that America was the archetypal example of a society where competition at all levels was encouraged. Maybe I could bring in Katharina at this point, who has moved from, indeed, Iain's lab and from the heart of Europe to build this remarkably successful career in America. So, Katharina, can you comment on how different it is? And was it thanks to Iain preparing you for all-out competition that you were able to succeed in America?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. The most important conclusion here is that to make it in America, the more competitive I had to, the more cooperative I had to become. So in Germany, I started my thesis I did in Heidelberg at the ZBH with their colleague. And in this lab, as I think in many labs at that time and still now, individuality is promoted and also competition. This was a field which was growing quickly, and so it wasn't really encouraged to collaborate. So that was a notion that sometimes was hard because you want to share your work, you want to reach out with and there's so much importantly opportunity for synergy, but it wasn't always easy at that time, and I thought this was important. Otherwise, you won't make it faster to the goal than your competitors. Now, moving to America, I had the opportunity. I was very fortunate to having gotten a position where I was encouraged to start a field from scratch, and I took that position being well aware of the risk, but one piece of advice that sticks to the present day from Kai Simons, actually, who you all well know, was in one of his cell biology classes, he said, find yourself a niche, especially when you start a group. You need a subspace where you're not shielded from isolation, but you have some room to be creative and to build up momentum. And that was the idea as I started, to launch a new sub area of research. Now, the problem began when I applied for grants. There is no one. People ask me, so who would study SNOT? Why would you study this? And of all people, and you can imagine that Iain had his comments all along the way, but very supportive. So what happened then is that I needed to collaborate. I needed to find PIs who had street credibility, so to say. For example, in fields that people knew, in drug delivery or in physics, we gathered as groups, and then we actually could raise funding, and only then we were able to raise funding. So this I think there's also the spirit of the European grant system, often that you have to combine multiple expertise to become collaborative. But a second thing happened. I was then hired by MIT, and part of the reason why I was hired by MIT was because I was hired by an engineering department, biological engineer. I'm a biochemist, cell biologist background, and I was hired because it was clear there was so much technical expertise and room for applications, and they were looking for new applications. And I, in turn, had, this really difficult material that I couldn't study with, at least not at the level of detail that I wanted to, with the tools that I grew up with the protein biochemistry. So there was a match which was built on cooperation, on the idea of synergy, and as opposed to what I thought when I came to America. People were really, especially at MIT, people were really open to working together and combining their expertise. Whereby one really important point here is that there's room for credit. So if the expertise is distinct enough, then not only can you build really potent synergies often, but then the credit also is relatively, straightforward to assign. That is important for tenure processes, for example, when you look at which author is positioned where, it can get really complicated, and then again competitive. So in an interesting way, with my move to America, I was not just forced, but really to live cooperation. And I want to build on a comment that was made before. There are different levels of cooperation and competition. I would say that, by being cooperative, you can become really competitive, because these companies, Moderna is in our backyard, within the companies, they need to cooperate very, very closely and strategically to become competitive at a larger scale. So So, and I see this in my lab also when we merge expertise across disciplines. That can be not just enlightening, but really strong and enabling.
So you're saying that also in America, collaboration is seen as a strength when implemented successfully.
It's not just a strength, but I dare say for many grant opportunities, you actually need to provide a bigger team. It is, for NIH, NSF, you do need it. You do get stronger often if done, judiciously. You get stronger by bringing in a bigger team. In fact, I couldn't have done it without a team. And I met most of my colleagues have multi-PI grants, whereby collaborations are not just encouraged, but really, really required. Where, for example, the basic science is fine if you identify, say, a piece of mucus biology, but then, to leverage this to make this available for therapeutic purposes, why not bring in someone who can, build parts of mucus to repair it when it's faulty, or to learn from it and apply mechanisms of transport. So there's a really strong encouragement, if not pressure, to collaborate. I would say, but of course,
Katharina.
Yeah, if you look at a higher level, the groups between each other, they are of course intensely competitive, depending on the field. My field is still a little shielded, but we have to keep our eyes peeled. Yeah.
I was in danger of saying that you proved that studying snot was not to be sneezed at, but I decided that wouldn't be appropriate to say, so I avoided that. But I think you did put your finger on it in highlighting that. I think that the real issue that you touched on is very important. I'll explore a bit more, is how we understand, how we build career structures in science that properly recognizes contributions of people. And that's the way where I think sometimes the idea of excessive competition can get in the way of encouraging innovative, risk-taking science to be done. But there's also, many of us here are focused on academic areas of research. I've noticed also there's some fantastic, interesting discussions going on in the chat. And if I may, can I ask Sabina from Basel, who I think is working in Novartis, to maybe comment or share your thoughts on how competition and collaboration are seen in the commercial sphere. Iain was talking about pharma companies here, but of course, most of us here are not working inside pharma companies. What does it feel like within a large commercial organization, and how do you treat that idea of collaboration? Would Novartis ever collaborate with Moderna to help public safety?
Hello. I'm still trying to switch my video on, which I don't seem to be able to. So let me just talk then. As you said, I do work for Novartis. And as I said in the chat, what we do internally, and this is a research organization of 6,000 people, is highly collaborative. And when I started to work there almost 20 years ago, I was really amazed to see how fast projects can progress by so many different disciplines working together, aligned behind a common goal to develop a new drug. And of course, there's competition between the pharma companies, but there's also collaboration between the pharma companies. It really depends on what it is about. Novartis itself, they are also involved in many collaborations, for example, to eradicate malaria. And they do, also with the Gates Foundation, they work with the Gates Foundation to bring low-cost drugs to developing countries. There are a lot of efforts, actually. In this particular case, when it comes to the vaccines, we are no longer in the vaccines business. So Novartis sold this a while ago. And so we are not part of it. We are also no longer really working on anti-infectives except for some tropical diseases. But when we started, we looked around and we, for example, provided all our anti-inflammatory drugs to be tested in proper clinical trials to see if they work. Also, the malaria drug, of course, was big at the beginning. So we engaged in a clinical trial to really clarify the question whether hydroxychloroquine is working or not. And we came to the conclusion it is not. With all of these things, we don't really make money. This is all generic drugs. So there is collaboration also now with other companies. We collaborate with other small biotechs also in Switzerland to work on general coronavirus protease inhibitors to be prepared for the future should there be another one. So there is no one answer to my view. It really depends on what the problem is. And sometimes there's a lot of collaboration with other companies. Like this is a very unique situation. I don't think we can generalize this to all we do. But there's certainly a lot of collaboration within the company, which is much more than I've seen when I was in academia. And this is really great. I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, thank you very much, Sabina. Eileen, if I could bring you in here. So you're leading a very successful, very competitive research program in EMBL Heidelberg. How do you go about mentoring young group leaders and young scientists in your program to deal with the whole issue of to what extent is collaboration or competition the best way forward for their careers?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, I agree with, what everybody has said in the past. I mean, I think we need competition. I mean, it drives innovation, and it also drives speed, but with a balance there, not at all costs. And we also need cooperation. And I think especially today in science, it's so interdisciplinary. And at EMBL, I mean, we have a small lab policy. You're not going to have a lab of 40 people. It's just you cannot cover all of the disciplines now in a way that you want to address your biological question. So you need to collaborate, and you can do that at different levels. And actually, I mean, Angus, I've seen some information in the chat there as well. It comes down to, we've had discussions also about, the difference between consortium level science versus individual lab science. And EMBL in the past has been a very much, individual creative labs. You give them, I always think of it like a incubator unit, like you give them everything they need and let them run, and everything is there for people to collaborate, and we really value and support collaboration. So when I have a group leader who says, well, now should I get into this consortium, I do have a chat with that person and say, well, what's the balance of your time now between doing this consortium science versus your own science? And it comes down to, I think you brought it up, Angus, is how do we reward people, or how do we value people's input? Because of course, in these large consortiums, and you have, one big paper or, 5 big papers or something, you have a junior group leader. Oftentimes with, science, we recruit competitive people. We are competitive ourselves, but, if you're a junior person, oftentimes it's the most competitive personality, let's say, that will be the loudest and will end up, being maybe the corresponding author, etc. And this is also an issue in science, particularly, how do we, and somehow in physics, they seem to have solved this. I mean, I don't know if there's a physicist out there, tell me otherwise, but it always seems like from the biologist's point of view that the physicists have sorted this out. But still in the life sciences, it's very important where your names are on the paper. And if you're one of the middle authors, it's not going to help you potentially that much. And I think this is an issue.
So, Iain, coming back to you as the originator of this discussion, and one I know that you have deep insight in, having moved to now launch a new institute in Italy, partly I think everyone would be really quite interested to hear a little bit about your plans for the new institute and what you're going to do, and also whether, if you could maybe just comment to us how you yourself see that as someone who has mentored many scientists throughout your career and seen success and less success and different paths I think we'd all love to hear from you on your views about this.
Yeah, so here in Milan, we're building an institute that will be really focused on human biology. So it has a narrower focus than many institutes. But human biology, of course, is also a very big subject, look from a different perspective. The idea will be to try to contribute initially in this period to genomic or personalized stratified medicine. That's actually the goal of the institute. But it should also be in place that, like EMBL, is open, that it provides services to the community. The Italian community is much less well centered by its government in terms of funding and career structuring, etc., and than many other countries, the European countries that tend to be are in our flow. There are other Italians I see in the chat and also in this participant who are here and maybe you say something like this. But I think in any institute that has a substantial level of correspondence, there is an even bigger requirement to be open to helping other people in the community. It's simply a moral duty as well as an initiative to do that. So the idea is to make an institute that will have quite a strong focus on aspects of genomics. It will not be totally focused on genomics, and obviously, in order to make breakthroughs in biology of relevance to help the long, we never know where these breakthroughs are come from. And so it will not be a narrow institute. It would have been focused, for example, on cancer or on Alzheimer's disease or something like that. It would be a very broad-based institute. And on I'm not sure if I can bring this into if I can bring this back to collaboration versus competition. But I think it is one thing that's very clear. It's as clear, if not more so, in Technopole than it was in EMBL, is that certain institutes have so many advantages from different sorts, from the way they're created, the way they're funded, the freedom that we have to operate, that there is a real duty to be collaborative and to be open to doing things, also conveying that to the people, even to the detriment of the institution itself.
And if you take, coming back to the idea, I'm interested in this idea of how this topic translates between, pure academic research and applied or commercial research. You might imagine that the companies with the biggest resources would just be so dominant, no one could ever compete with them. Yet in some industries, at least, I guess the computing industry and the software industry, that's one where we've seen time and again where you apparently have the hegemony of some immovable force, the mountain like IBM, and yet Microsoft came in and started from very small beginnings, and through innovation and novel ideas came to be a massive successful company. And then we've seen this time and again with Google, Facebook, other software companies developing. Is there a tendency that when institutes or organizations become too large and homogeneous, that's part of the problem, that you homogenize thinking and then you lose that disruptive effect where you can have innovate, the pain in the ass guys who come through, or women who come through and say, no, but what if it's totally different? And that Iain Mattaj has got it completely wrong. He's so up his own backside. He thinks he knows everything and it's wrong.
Yeah, I think in the commercial world, there are hundreds of examples of companies that seek a total dominance for a time, very quickly becoming obsolete because they're begging minutes. And I think what the phenomenon that you alluded to, that you've had a uniformity of thought within an individual organization that can become very dominant, but very inward-looking and very resistant to change. And I think that's true in academia as it is in industry. In industry, where examples seem to be more spectacular because you have companies that just seem so big and they couldn't possibly fit, and then they do. And it's very hard to imagine what would cause them to feel right up into the minute you do. And so I think that it's not an answer, it's a description of the phenomenon that I think it definitely happens, and that it's very obvious that the commercial has had hundreds of times and will continue to happen.
I think some of the companies. Sorry,
Eileen. I was just wanting to bring you in here actually to say that EMBL, I think is an example. It's not completely unique, but it's a rare example of a type of organization where you have an opportunity not to avoid competition, but to allow people a lot of freedom through central funding to explore iconoclastic ideas that are a bit different, and really innovate and work in areas that perhaps are not immediately fashionable. Is that something that you're very conscious of in running a division? Do you encourage people or feel that there's almost an obligation because EMBL is funded in a different, more centralized way to encourage more risk-taking and thinking outside the box?
Yes, I think so. It's a very good point. So we have core funding, which is fantastic. I mean, just to say, so to do lots of genomics, etc., I still need a lot of grants. But I totally agree that actually what I do when new group leaders start, because it's a system, as everybody on this call knows, it's, for group leaders, it's 5+4 contracts. So you have a 5-year set there, and that's very unusual. Actually, most grants are only 3 years. So I actually say to the new group leaders at the beginning in the first year that now this is the time, I think, that they really can hit the ground running. They don't have to teach. Go for it. That's the time to really build it up and to think really big. The second 4 years, the last 2 years of that, you have to think of where am I going next, etc. But yeah, I do really encourage that, to think big, to do something. You need to have a safety net, but to do something big and bold, absolutely. But I think it's great. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that if I may, that my own very fond memories of my time at EMBL when Iain was young. Not only I was younger, even Iain was younger in those days, and I think back with such pleasant memories because it was such a fun time and an enjoyable time. And one of the other things that I felt was both tremendously enjoyable and inspirational, but the opportunity that came from EMBL really breaking down boundaries between departments to encourage people from different areas to interact and collaborate. I feel, certainly for me, that was a fantastic opportunity I benefited from. And I think a lot of the most exciting science really comes when people can work on the interfaces between disciplines. And EMBL's been a model example of how you can not make it happen, but facilitate it. Yeah. There's a famous quotation, I've heard it attributed to Max Perutz or to or to Francis Crick, and maybe they both said it or one of them said it, but at the LMB, when in the labs in Cambridge, which were famous for innovative science, molecular biology, and when asked, how as the director do you make people collaborate across disciplines and innovate? And the answer was, as the director, I can't do that, but what I definitely can do is prevent it happening. And that seemed like a very interesting take on this, because, you know, from the top down, you can put in place structures that actually make it really difficult for people to, you know, administratively cross department boundaries or do that. And you can't force people to collaborate, but just taking away the obstacles that get in their way and letting bright people spontaneously combust ideas and interact is an interesting approach. I don't know, Iain, if that's something that you've actively tried to promote now that you've moved to Italy.
Maybe if I could,
or if you agree with even. Yeah, sorry, Eileen.
No, I was just going to say one thing, because in relation to EMBL, you were saying in terms of my department unit as well, but like one thing that we try to do is actually I don't hire lots of people directly on the same topic for exactly that reason, because, you know, each, and actually most of the units are like this as well, they're quite diverse. So my unit is very diverse, but, you know, you'll have somebody next door, you know, working on bacteria, somebody else is working on human genetics, etc. Somebody else is, you know, working on thermal stability of proteins, etc. But it's having that mix of people and having retreats and really discussing the science and getting into it that you realize, like, oh yeah, but like you can do this, you know, and that's I think the fun part of it as well. So anyway, it's just was related to what you said.
Can I say one thing? Can I say one thing, Angus, please?
Yeah, Gabor, please come in. I was going to bring you in. I actually had you down here to come in, but now's a great chance.
Oh my God,
come in.
So to the question of innovation, I mean, I think it's also a question of being complacent, and large companies, especially if you're successful and if you are, you know, in position 1, 2, or 3, you become complacent because you think you are doing well. A most recent example is the car industry. If you look at Volkswagen, for instance, and what actually Tesla did with their innovation and how they actually shook up the whole industry. So you don't have to go to software. It happens in all industries. And I think this complacency is a big hindrance of innovation. They do a lot of innovation still, but in their own sphere, they don't step out of the box. And it's actually allowing people, and that's what EMBL does as well, to actually come up with completely crazy out-of-the-box ideas and give them enough funding so they can actually go and get on with it. And there's a very interesting saying which is attributed to Henry Ford, although it's not sure that he actually said it, which is, he said, if I would have done what the people wanted, I would have invented faster horses. But instead he invented the car. So I think that's actually quite a nice little, you know, little phrase to keep in mind.
I agree. Iain?
And I think that this is to add to what Gabor said, and actually it's about EMBL. But I don't know how many of you heard Jacques Dubochet giving its Nobel lecture. But and there are various lectures that people give you in the dark right center. But there was one fabulous thing that said he actually said a whole bunch of very interesting and heartwarming things, because that's the side of parts of me. But one of the most interesting things he said was that, you know, I was told when I was hired at EMBL that I would be able to do what I wanted. And so what we wanted to do was to vitrify water. And so we knew, you know, it's simple. If you want to vitrify water, you just have to freeze it very quickly so it doesn't have time to form any ice. So, there's no principle. There's nothing to argue. Many people said prior to them achieving it that we wouldn't be able to do it, that it was impossible to get freeze quickly. But he said, you know, the first 2.5 years I was at EMBL, and that was me and my technician, whose name also was Angus, by the way. And what did we do? We just froze water. And then we looked at it, and like a microscope, every day just froze water. That was it. That was what we did. And we were working in an institute that allowed us to do that for 2.5 years without taking what else funded or closing down our one. And this didn't work.
Oh, that must have been before you were director. Sorry, no,
That was for sure before I was director. The first thing I would have done before I was director
exactly.
was to close down the blend existing electron microscope department. Because as our colleague Ken Stinenberg once said, I don't actually know what we're doing there, but all I know is that every time you change a screw on the microscope, it costs us 10,000 Deutschmarks in the screw. Anyway, that was...
Yeah, very interesting. Katharina, if I could bring you again as one of the alumni who has experienced working at EMBL, working the European system, and working also in very competitive big science American universities, do you feel in this very successful model that you see, MIT or Harvard, Boston Science, that there is just as much opportunity for cross-department collaboration? Have you encountered any extra resistance or obstacles to doing that, or do you think it's valued just as much?
I actually wanted to comment on exactly that, where I think the reason why I feel so at home at MIT is because it is structured in spirit and actually very similarly to EMBL, whereby between the departments, they're not separated by buildings, they're not even separated by doors, but it's one long hallway. We have the infinite corridor, which, passes through many doors and departments and labs, and it's just amazing when you think, and it does indeed have the effect that people go down the hallway, go to chemical engineering or to material science or to physics and math, and they're connected, and it's intentional. It does really work. The students pop into your lab, they cross-fertilize, so to speak. It is a very powerful architecture that really facilitates this interaction. And I think fondly of my days at EMBL where you have this web of connection, which is organic. You can't enforce it, as you say, but you can prevent it. And by enabling this openness, both architecturally but also in spirit, I think that I sense very strongly. I should say where I am now, MIT. I should say though that it didn't feel that way everywhere. Harvard is a different beast, and in the very best way also, but the level of competition there is different, not higher, not lower, it's different. So where suddenly authorship placement, this is a theme in the chat, is very important. And I think it's also important at MIT, but I think the disciplines are distinct enough. When I work with someone who does microfluidics, and I'm second with last, it's clear that the microfluidics lab would not have done the mucus research without. So it's a little more straightforward to assign credit, and that was the point I tried to make. Cooperation works well then, especially if the individuals can be credited for accordingly, especially if a career is at stake. Situation is a little different in companies where they work as teams and not necessarily the individuals want to or need to be credited, although that can also be a huge motivation. So to your question, it very much depends on where you go, but we do have this model here also, and I dare say it's very, very successful and empowering in its own way. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I'm loving and living it. I definitely feel very, very much at home here because it's so similar to EMBL.
That's great to hear. And in fact, I was a postdoc at MIT, and I can say I also had a great time there and valued it enormously. Katharina and also Eileen, I'd like again to ask a very unfair question, but why not have things be a little bit controversial? Do you think some of these issues and problems are because there are too many men and old men running science, and that women would do a better job?
Yes. Frankly, a little bit. I was just actually wondering, and something that Katharina said a few times. She said, being competitive, when she was describing our PhD work, in Heidelberg, being competitive at that time. And she said, at that time a few times. And I was wondering, and it's true when I came into science as well, it was all about being first when you published the paper. Like whatever, so it's not like the scientific discovery, but like you got the paper in first and your paper was published 1 month before the other paper, etc. And I feel like, it's also what Katharina said. I think times and the type of competition has changed and the type of collaboration has changed. And the second things are more collaborative. But at least I think nowadays, this type of competition about being the first, I feel like is almost gone. And I think that was a lot of alpha males, in my opinion, who was, and promoting that and saying, our paper was in there, before your paper, which is, that's nothing to do with the scientific discovery. It's.
Katharina, what should you?
So yeah, I work in the males world, although it's changing. Engineering, the differences are even steeper. And, sometimes I have to bring up my voice in a classroom. I am Dr. Ribbeck and my male colleague is Professor so-and-so. So there it's tangible how there's, but the good news is that I think some traits that are, I find sometimes more, it's the desire for harmony as opposed to friction. And you can convert that in a lab to produce a highly cooperative lab. This doesn't mean that you're less competitive. In fact, sometimes I feel that, I do see that by a strong cooperation within the lab. This is also a principle companies, big companies, Novartis, we work closely with Novartis, so we see it all the time. A strong collaboration, smaller scale can really, really make you competitive. If this is something that is, I don't know if females specifically brought it in. I don't think so, but I think a desire for harmony, at least in my own world. I don't do well with competition. I hate board games. My daughter loves it. It's a struggle every single time. I played volleyball. I loved the game, but I hated I don't get a kick out of someone losing. I do get a kick out of, doing good science though. And there I agree the competition does help you focus. In fact, it forces you to focus and be effective. So yeah.
I think women are competitive. I at least for myself, I can say, I'm a very competitive person and anybody who knows me would say that too. But I think the expression of that competitiveness can sometimes be different between the genders. That's my impression. But anyway.
Yeah, I think generalizations are all, as we all know. Go on, Iain.
Sorry, I wanted to bring up again this at that time, because this is something. So Angus was briefly in the same field that Katharina was talking about at that time, when she was in Beardside. And Angus, probably more than anybody, I was supposed to suffer from the alpha male in the field at that point, being told once. And I don't mention it, women don't have to go into this, Angus. But I remember once, Angus and I were both at a meeting in Sweden. And Angus, to his bad fortune, Scherer takes me back to the airport with that alpha male and was told in no uncertain terms that he had no business working in that field. And that he should just get out of it and do something else. And I think it's really. I was fortunate that for a long time I worked in the field of analytic processing, where I guess I could also manage to have a bad experience. But that was a rare bad experience. Also in my PhD, I had experience with competition in that. At the same time, but nevertheless, I think generally the R&D community was a tough one in the sense that people were very hard on the science and very rigorous about science. But I too was a pretty supportive community in the main, with a few small exceptions. Whereas when we got to the cytoplasmic transport field, it was a jungle with a few small exceptions. And these were not alpha males, these were saber-toothed tigers. Right. And it was, as you said, I think both of it was just no fun. It was really not fun to go to a meeting because you couldn't talk about your results. Nobody else could talk about their results. It was just, it really spoiled a huge amount of building. And so competition, and somebody said this a few minutes ago, chat, competition can be really unhealthy as well as a healthy thing. And so I think it's not competition per se, it's how that is applied to how you behave in particular situations. That's the important thing. I've been just like this is just for fun, but I've been looking. David Thomas has been on my screen for quite a bit of the afternoon, and I thought he had a sick picture behind it of whatever it is, the Wallace Monument or something, and I just realized it's gotten dark. So, David, is that a real picture, or is it? It's not the Wallace Monument. I don't know. It's a church spire.
It's a photograph out of my window, and I changed it because it has gone dark.
So it was a fake background song, but it didn't change. Thank goodness. I thought I'd go crazy for saying it's a photograph.
Sorry.
I
didn't catch who was speaking.
All right. I just wanted to point one nuance in there that, it's really, I have yet to find someone who's so competitive at once and had an as collaborative lab that I've rarely seen. So that was really a model that people within the lab were so mutually supportive. So I couldn't even decide if Iain is competitive or cooperative because it really depends on the scale that you look at. And this lab, the people in this lab were still are to the present day mutually nurturing. That I think is a very, very important point of enabling his competitiveness.
Yeah, we had to take care of each other because I for sure did.
I'm sure Graham, who's been commenting here, will also have some memories of that he can share with people. Iain's brought up, I think, an absolutely correct point. I agree with 100 times over, which is that some of the worst behavior, which we've seen through long careers, is no fun. And I would also categorize where it may be that you can still do important science by behaving that way and be successful in a system, but you don't have to behave that way to be successful. And I think it's terribly important that the role models that the leading people in science that young scientists take their inspiration from send the right examples to them. That competition is really another word done correctly, in my opinion, for excellence and ingenuity and inventiveness. And I think one of the things that occurs to me in thinking even about the idea about women, men, and different role models, these are all generalizations, but should we be organizing science as a sporting competition? Or should we be organizing it as a community activity? And I think in different times and different situations, elements of both are relevant, and getting that blend between those two issues is the challenge. Because if it just becomes all a sporting competition, you get the sort of behavior that Iain referenced, which many of us have seen, because the only issue is who gets over the line, who scores the goal, who wins the cup at the end of the competition. And if we do things as only a community activity, there's a danger that we lack the diversity of thought and disruptive innovation that can come through. And I don't know how to make that blend. It's way above my pay grade. I don't even know how to organize or moderate one of these sessions because I've allowed the session to go on way past the time when we were supposed to stop. And I hope people will forgive me for that. But I think this has been a fantastic topic for discussion. Nush, how are we doing for time? I realize I've done a very bad job of moderating here with respect to timekeeping, but I hope that at least we've had an opportunity to explore the topic.
Actually, you're perfectly on time. I have really enjoyed, once again, your moderation, Angus. You're brilliant. We couldn't ask for a better moderator. We have had a nice amount of people joining in outside the guest speakers. I hope everybody's enjoyed it as much as I have. I just wanted to thank, first of all, Angus for all the hours he puts in planning all these Coffee with EMBLs, both for this year and next year, and the content and speakers. Thank all the guest speakers who join us. Thank you, Iain, Katharina, and Eileen. I know you're all really busy, and it's great to have you come here and relax with us. And we have we're planning our next year's events, and I have nothing to add to that apart from thank you everyone for joining us. It's fabulous seeing all these familiar faces. And Fatima is going to have a word, our chair of the Alumni Association.
Thank you. I just wanted to just take this opportunity to wish you all a happy New Year and a very Merry Christmas. I just wanted to also to kind of give you a little bit of a balance of what the Alumni Association has done during this year. I mean, not to get just very brief. I won't be too long. So if you ask yourself for a word of two that would define this year, which word would that be for you? For me, it would have been, challenging and also weird. It has been a really weird year. But despite of, we've been challenged, but we've also have known how to take advantage of this challenge. So I think we've ended up victorious. And it has been rewarding for the Alumni Association in many respects. So we started the year with a big change in our board, and with the first meeting ever that was so populated in Barcelona in January. And we talk about many things. In addition to the usual things, we talked about new initiatives, like, for example, the results of this survey that we launched to know what were your needs, to know how could be useful for you. And there were many issues that came out of that survey, but one of the most popular aspects was the mentoring. And we have organized the board in kind of working groups, and with the strong support of the office, and especially also from Peter, there will be a new kind of pilot mentoring program that is going to come out in January. Also, another big thing is a big success is this event, Coffee with EMBL. The problems of actually not being able to meet in person has driven us to look for ways to meet online. And I think this, which was an initiative of Angus and also of Nosh, that they were just kind of waiting for the opportunity to apply. I mean, I think it has, you all probably agree with me that it has been very successful, and it's something that we plan to keep for the rest of the years, even when the pandemic is over. We have also learned that we've had our World Alumni Day as usual, and we have not, again, been able to meet together, but we have been able to take advantage of the net, and it's something that we will keep also during the following years. We also are thinking of many other initiatives, not only, you know that we had this Leonard Philipson Awards and the John Kindry Awards. We've been thinking in having also kind of a tribute to Foris Kafatos in a word of an event more related to science and society. We're still looking for funds to do that, but we'll hear about that probably next year. We'll see. And yeah, we're doing little steps also to improve our web, because, a dream would be that the association would be something useful for you, something that when you have whatever problem or whatever, from small things like, okay, I'm going to this country, let's see who's there, who can advise me on, I don't know, how moving companies or rental cars, whatever. To more serious things like I'm looking for a job, or I need someone for a job. And that the first thing you think is, okay, let's see what the EMBL Association can do for me. unless this makes this a useful, community. I think we're doing steps, big steps towards that, and yeah, I think that even though the pandemic is not over, and we may have weird Christmas, we keep moving, and from home we try to make the best of us. So thank you very much, everyone. We are here for anything you need, and have a very happy New Year.
Thank you very much, Fatima. That's a great way to wind up for the year. And I just want to add extend my best wishes to everyone. It's great to see so many friends. I see Roberto online. I see so many faces, Niovi, and so many Gabor and friends and colleagues. It's been great to have the chance to meet up with you. And I hope you all have a nice, relaxing holiday, and that together we also have an uplifting 2021 and can come back together again and discuss some more relevant topics going forward. So thank you again, Iain, Katharina, and Eileen, and thank you to everyone at EMBL, Noosh and the team who really put these things together. And it's been a privilege for me to play a small role in helping to carry this out. So for me, bye-bye.